Hi, my name's Keira Forsythe. I'm 22 years old. I'm going to try and cut a long story into a short story here. This is a story about how I went from being a 2-arm girl to a 1-arm girl in the space of 7 years, but a 3-hour surgery and 4 kilograms lost. So here we go. So in 2012, I was walking my dog, put my arm through the plastic bit of a retractable lead, like an extended lead. My dog chased the squirrel because I pointed out that the squirrel was there. Not my brightest move. And basically, I couldn't get my arm out the lead and I broke it like this across the growth plate. And when my arm came out of cast eventually, it ended up being 13 weeks because every time they'd take the cast off, I would be in immense pain and worse pain than when I'd broken my arm. I basically got told maybe she's just being a dramatic teenage girl and got sent home. So I now didn't have my cast on and I had 2 weeks of immense pain, like the worst pain I'd ever experienced in my life, and I'd broke so many bones. I did lots of sports as a child, lots of contact sport, and my main sport was Taekwondo, and I'd broke things like my collarbone, cheekbones, little fingers, and I'd never experienced pain like this. And it basically lasted for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden my arms got pins and needles in my fingertips and it started to go numb, and the numbness spread from my fingers the whole way down until my elbow. And I could no longer move my arm just like this. I had to physically look at my arm and concentrate to move individual fingers, my wrist, and lift my arm up at the elbow. So I had to see lots of specialists, and I was diagnosed with a really strange variation of complex regional pain syndrome, which is shortened to CRPS. CRPS isn't very well known about. It's not talked about an awful lot. Sometimes you see it. People have amputations and they make it onto TV shows or in the papers, but it's how I describe CRPS, and I think it's a famous saying, but I've sort of put it onto CRPS, that basically it only takes a grain of rice to tip a scale. So basically you're born with CRPS, they think, you don't know you have it, and it takes one specific thing that they don't really know what it is, one specific pain response, and it basically, your brain and your nervous system misjudge how they should react to it and set a loop that doesn't stop. So for me, breaking my wrist was a grain of rice that tipped the scale and set off the CRPS. So the numbness is a really strange variation of CRPS. If you look it up, people talk about pain. I was the complete opposite. At this point, I was trapping my arm in car doors, I was burning it, and I didn't know. I did loads of medical trials and there was nothing they could really do about it. They discussed, should I have it amputated, because although it was a functioning arm, I couldn't use it for anything. I was having to like tape it to hockey sticks and stuff. So they were discussing that, and then it was like, no, as long as she keeps coming for like x-rays and stuff, if she traps it in anything, then she can get on with her life. So I did for 18 months, and then one day I woke up and I could feel my bedsheet on my arm, and I thought I was dreaming, and I started rubbing my arm and I could feel it again, and I burst into tears, went into my parents' room crying, and we all had a good cry, a good family cry. I got discharged from the hospital. They were like, they didn't really understand it. They were like, maybe the initial pain signal from breaking your arm, which was misread, has sort of ended, and it's been gone for so long that your brain had shut off the messages and now is sort of reintegrating. They really don't know. Don't quote me on this, because the hospital was as confused as I was. but I took it. I was like, yeah, I will take that, thank you. Discharged. I carried on normal life for a year, and then I was in school one day, thought I was on the last step, stepped out, and there was actually 2 more stairs. So I sort of tripped, put my arms out, caught myself, and my left hand started getting pins and needles. And I was like, is it, isn't it? Like, but I always sort of just got on with things. I went to Taekwondo that night, blocked a punch, and I dropped to the floor crying, and I started to scream crying, and I was like, Dad, it's come back again, it's come back. Like, anyone who's got CRPS will tell you it's the most distinctive pain. It's not like anything I'd ever experienced before, and it basically, you could feel, I could basically, from my elbow to like my fingertips, I could feel shooting sensations that felt almost like fire running through my veins. The burning was unreal. It was like burning, stabbing, all at once, and it would sort of, you couldn't even put it on a scale. It's rated one of the, if not the worst pain condition out there, and you basically, you know there's nothing wrong with your limb or affected body part, but your brain, your nervous system just can't get round that. So the pain basically spread from my wrist and my hand up to my elbow again, where it had been when it was numb. I went to the hospital and things like that, and basically they were like, it's CRPS, it's come back, it never really goes away. It's almost like you're in remission kind of in between. So some people have it for years, or some people might have it for like a few months and then it kind of goes away for a bit, but you're always told something could trigger it and it can come back. And for me, this is what triggered it to come back, but just not in the strange variation I'd had before. So basically, for 3 years of my life, I slept 15 minutes, like in 15-minute intervals, for a total on average a night of 2 to 3 hours. And I tracked my sleep on like a Fitbit, and it was like, you need to sleep, and I was like, I'm really trying, but I couldn't get rain on my arm, I couldn't let bed sheets touch it, clothes, my fingers couldn't touch each other, so I would sit with my arm, basically this bit on a table with my arm like this, like a claw. So all my photos from that time of my life, I was like this, like a claw. And I basically would do, I think it's called calisthenics, where I would move my arm without anything touching to try and keep as much movement, because some people with CRPS, it basically like not fuses, but they can't then move their affected limb. And I basically, my life stopped. I say my life stopped at that point. I went from a thriving, functioning human being to a human being. I was just there. I was a person, but I wasn't me anymore. I think I went really subdued in myself. I was so positive, and I think I probably, over the whole time I had CRPS, I probably cried about 3 times for feeling sorry for myself. And the rest of the time I thought, people with CRPS have got it worse than me. There's people dying, I'm not dying. And I got on with life. I was told to drop out of school, especially because I was doing sports. I was told to reevaluate my career prospects and to look at benefits. That was my advice given to me, which at the time I was maybe like 18, 19. I found it really hard to do the time scale, but to be that young and told your whole life is basically stopped, wrap yourself in bubble wrap now before it gets worse, was really hard to put a positive spin on. So especially, I always felt, when I had it, I felt awful for my family, and I've almost felt relieved that I had the symptoms and my sister didn't, because they're not sure if CRPS is hereditary. So I was just so pleased that it was me and not my sister going through it. So I ended up doing lots of medical trials, lots of variations of medication. I did things like spinal cord stimulators, where you're basically awake for 2 hours and they put metal cords up your spine, and then it attaches to it's a bit like a TENS machine. So I had 2 of those trialled. I did high levels of things like morphine, and nothing touched the pain. Nothing ever came close to touching the pain. So after 3 years, I turned around and said, I want to get on with my life again. I'm not a functioning human being. I want to try having it amputated. To which the NHS was like, no. Like, are you crazy? And I was like, maybe. But CRPS, you're not meant to have an amputation. You're not meant to have any non-life-threatening operations and stuff like that, because again, it could be the next grain of rice that tips the scales. So there's nothing to say that you have an amputation and it doesn't spread up, or you could have phantom limb pain that feels just as bad. Or some people even have it where their CRPS, because it's to do with the brain and not the actual affected limb, it can just swap. So some people have it in, say, their left leg, they have it amputated, and then all of a sudden they get CRPS in their right leg. So I understood why the doctor said this, but for me, I wasn't a functioning human being. I wanted a better quality of life, and they said, you've done medical trial after medical trial for 3 years, take a year out and basically learn to live with the condition you have, and then come back to us, see what we can now offer you. So I did a year of functioning, kind of, as a human being, getting dressed at 2 in the morning in case I knocked myself, and at least then if I passed out or cried for a few hours, I got on with my day after. We basically as a family came up with strategic ways of parking outside buildings, with people holding umbrellas over me, with me tilted over so that I could run into restaurants and stuff. And after a year I was like, I can't do this anymore, I want it off. So I went to a different hospital. This one was more specialised in CRPS amputations, because it's a military hospital, and they agreed to amputate my arm. They understood why I wanted to do it. I told them that even if it just meant a smaller part of my arm was sore, it meant that I was less likely to trigger it. But for me, I needed to know that I'd tried everything available. So a year ago in March, I had my arm amputated. My hopeful outcome of it was a 25% reduction in pain. I was so excited on the day of my operation. I'll see if I can insert photos anywhere, but I basically had like an arrow on my arm, and I was so ready for it to come off. Like, I strutted down the corridor in the most minging green socks that the hospital had given me ever. I had a nerve block during the operation, so when I woke up I was pain-free and I was fine. And then as it wore off, I had like bone pain, because obviously they cut through the bone. And when that wore off, I was in no pain, and everyone was like, oh my god. And I was so shocked that everyone was like, it's not a guarantee, it might just be because the nerve block and everything. And touch wood, no pain still to this day. We're now a year and a bit on, and yeah, no CRPS. So which is so strange. I had 4 years in total in constant pain, and to go from that to no pain was unbelievable. I started to sleep straight after the operation. For the first 6 to 8 months I was sleeping about 12 to 14 hours a day in total, as in like I would sleep a solid 12 hours at night and then probably nap maybe like 2 hours, 3 hours a day. I slept and my body just needed it, because that's what I'd missed so much. And I met Stumpy. So Stumpy is a bit bruised at the moment because I do Taekwondo again. But I basically have what they class as the perfect scar. My surgeon was incredible. We couldn't have asked for a better job, and such a nice man. So I had my arm off, and my mum reached out. So back in the day, I went to the Commonwealth Games to watch the athletics in Glasgow, and we were lucky enough to meet one of the athletes called Mark Dry, who is a hammer thrower. I've followed his journey since then, and she basically reached out to him and said, look, my daughter's gone through this, would it be possible for you to like do her a card or something? She really admires you. And when I tell you, this is one of the nicest people you will ever meet. He is one of the nicest people. So him and his girlfriend drove, I don't even know how far it was definitely over an hour. Like, it was a really long journey, the whole way to Preston, the day after I had my amputation, to come and visit me. And he had a photo with me, like he sat and chatted with us for well over an hour, and there were such lovely people. And basically he took a photo and put it on his social media to say like what an inspiration I was, which I not hate that word. I don't see myself as an inspiration. I see myself as someone who's found a very good way mentally of overcoming hurdles that have been put in place for me. And I think because I've always seen as thank goodness it was me who got it, and someone who could cope with it, rather than someone who maybe got depressed with it or didn't have the right support network. So for me, I'm always grateful I had it, because I overcame CRPS, or the worst of what I've had of CRPS. So he put a post, and I said this is the day after my op. If my pain continues to, like, no pain, I'm going back to Taekwondo, because it's my love, my passion. I'd done Taekwondo for something like 7 years, and I've been doing it's something like 6 to 7 hours a week in club. The year I broke my arm, I'd just got my black belt, and I was like, I'm going back to Taekwondo. It's my passion. I miss it so much. And they say things happen for a reason. I don't know if they do. He put the post up, and what I didn't know was he was friends with one of the Taekwondo GB athletes called Damon Sampson, and he was basically like, look, if you want me to make contact, I can make contact with Damon, see what happens, because I'd done a style of Taekwondo which didn't have a separate para division, but the Olympic style Taekwondo does. And I was like, I'll see how I go with my pain. No one expects it to stay as it is, pain-free. So, but he also had another friend on his Instagram called Andrew Deere, who is the GB Paralympic coach. So I didn't know this at the time, but Andrew had seen the post and he followed me on Instagram. At the time, I was sort of flooded with messages and I was really out of it on morphine. So I didn't notice, and then Mark messaged me a few weeks later saying, do you want me to reach out to GB? Because I just wanted a way, I wanted to know the best way to get back into Taekwondo as a para-athlete. Was I better doing the new style, the old style I'd done? Was there certain clubs that catered for it? Like, what do I do? And I was like, no, it's okay. I saw Andrew message me, had followed me, so I messaged him, and he was like, look, I'd love to sort of help you out. And he basically got me in touch with the development team at GB, and I met one of them, And basically I now do Taekwondo, not full time. I sort of do it most of the week, training at home or doing weights at the gym. And sometimes I'm lucky enough to be invited to the GB centre, so that's crazy. Like, you go in there, and I was lucky enough to be invited up. I went in, all of a sudden I'm seeing people who I've cried watching the TV, watching these people win their medals. And I've followed them my whole childhood, and now they're just casually walking down the corridor, and I looked at my mum like, what? So I did a day there, absolutely loved it, and they were like, want to go back to a club at yours, sort of like get back into Taekwondo, we'll keep in touch. So I'm lucky enough to get to go up there every now and again and train with some of the best in the world. People like Amy Truesdale, who's become one of my best friends, which is crazy. For any of you who don't know, she is the elite in para taekwondo, and definitely follow her on whatever, because what a girl, like, such an inspiration. So I now do taekwondo most of my time. I also work retail at the weekends, so I work at Marks and Spencer's. I did this the whole way through my arm journey, which has been interesting, but you've got to earn money, and for me it was like, if I can't learn to drive because I pass out, if I can't do normal things but I can get a job, I'm going to get a job. So I currently do like 5 days a week where I get invited up to the GB centre to do a bit of training, or I'm training at home. I've lucky enough that during this COVID epidemic, we've built a Taekwondo gym in my greenhouse in my garden. Or my parents hold the pads for me. I go to my local gym. I've got a PT called Rob Massum, who's literally changed everything for my life. And I'll never be able to thank him enough for it. He took someone who hadn't done any exercise for 4 years and had just had an arm off, and basically changed all the exercises. He researched so much how to balance my spine back out, how to lift weights, how to adapt with resistance bands. Like, can't thank him enough. So yeah, I now go to the gym, I do taekwondo, I work retail, I'm doing a business degree via the Open University around all that, and I'm hoping that taekwondo becomes what I do, either full time or the predominant part of my time, because it's my passion and I love it. So yeah, I think that's basically my life as it is. This last year, to put it in perspective, I did an Instagram post about this, but I went out in the rain and my whole family cried. I went in the snow for the first time and my whole family cried. I put on a coat and my mum cried. What else have I done? I go on nights out with no issues now. I'm able to take a jacket out with me and take on and off when I go into a restaurant or if it gets hot or cold. I still sleep a ridiculous number of hours and I enjoy it so much. I'm the nap queen. I've made lifelong friends doing taekwondo, and people who inspired me my whole childhood I can now call friends, which is crazy. I'm pursuing my dreams and my passions pain-free. The hard thing with CRPS is I'm technically in almost like remission, so it could come back. So in my eyes, I enjoy life for the now. I'm almost going against medical advice doing what I do, because I could get kicked and it could set off CRPS somewhere in my body, or I could get punched. But for me, if the risk is the same as getting a paper cut and doing it, or getting kicked and it happening. I would rather do what I love doing, and that sets it off, rather than a mundane thing and I haven't got to enjoy life. So I say 2012 changed my life. Having my arm amputated started a whole new chapter of my life, and now I'm living my best life. I just basically do everything now as a normal functioning person. I'm awful at doing shoelaces, but I've learned how to chop an onion now, because I used to be really bad at chopping. And yeah, so that's my life basically. I just think if anyone's got a pain condition out there, or something that's stopping them doing something, you've got to try, and I know how hard it is, to find the positives in life, because there are people worse off, which is a hard way to look at things at times, especially when something so debilitating's happened. It's really hard at times to take yourself out of it and look in on yourself. But I knew I still had a strong family support network the whole time. There's friends who I class as family now, because they've been through a crazy experience with me, and come out on the other side. I'm so fortunate that what's happened to me shaped me as a person, and I almost wouldn't change what happened to me, because I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have met the people I've met, and it took me from being someone who was very introverted and shy, to someone who now helps people, or if people are struggling with different things, I feel like I've been through a lot and I can help people. So I think you've got to always look at it. Life isn't perfect, but what you do with it is what matters, and I'm not perfect, but I've taken quite a bad situation and I made it work for me. So yeah, I hope this has helped people, or people have found it interesting. If you want to look into CRPS more, it's really interesting, and it's not as well talked about as much as it should be. So yeah, hopefully I'll make it somewhere in Taekwondo and you'll see me around. So thank you.